Everyone's using AI to produce more content faster than ever. But to be blunt, it can also feel like we're just adding to the noise. The businesses that are winning trust aren't trying to outpublish everyone else. They're showing up in person, building real relationships, and letting the owner's face and voice do what no logo can ever do. Today, Tim, Kelsey, and I are sitting down with Scott Pressimone, a former leader on the Pronto team, now working as a fractional growth leader, helping founders, owners, and regional directors across the US and APAC. Hey Scott, it's great to have you joining one of our partner talks about what's happening in the market and in the boardroom. Really excited to interview you today.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here, Pierre. Thank you to you and Tim for having me, and looking forward to the chat.
With everyone using generative AI to produce piles of content, and really can feel like this at times, I feel like my LinkedIn feed is so busy and I feel really overwhelmed when I go there. So hopefully we're not going to add more to it, but I think there's more marketing noise than ever, essentially. So what does that actually mean for a business owner trying to build genuine authority and to stand out? What does it take, and what do you see, Scott, from all the work that you do?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Pierre. I think we are all struggling a little bit with how to best use AI. And I think one of the probably worst ways to do it is to use AI to help you think and to help you publish a bunch of content online. Because, whether or not you have M dashes or not, the point is we all see things in our feed, on our social media, and it's the same generic stuff over and over again, or we could say like vanilla content over and over again. And there's probably 100 times more of it because it's easier to produce. And I think if we take this as like a marketing angle or an angle of running an agency as you all do, or a tech company or anything else like that, that could be commoditized, right? It's really hard to stand out in some of these markets. And I think the answer is not to just produce more content than everyone else, right? Because as you just said, it gets very noisy. In my opinion, I think the biggest thing that a company can do to stand out from the noise is really to put their face out there more, right? And this comes down to things like personal branding. It's things that we don't always want to talk about because a lot of us do like to operate. We like to say, I just want to run my business. I want to, focus on delivering value to my clients. But the reality is we have to market ourselves. We have to get out there more. And that's where I think personal branding is so important, because that's what builds up that trust factor. That's what essentially is something that our competitors don't have. They don't look like us. They don't talk like us. They don't have the experiences we have.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like the content marketing space of things like blog posts or LinkedIn posts is already crowded. For years, since SEO has become a popular marketing tactic, that's always been a big push of like, we got to be producing content all the time. How do we produce it faster? And AI just took that from 100 miles per hour to 1,000 miles per hour. But it's just regurgitated ideas, and none of that is really going to help you stand out. In a way, it comes down to human nature. People want to do business with people, and it's so much more powerful to show your face in front of somebody else, whether that's on a video or in person at a conference, make a real human connection with someone that way.
Yeah. So, I double down on whatever everyone already said, but I think just being human and being different, right? And I'm going to add that being different is important too, right? So being human, people do business with other people. And I think you said that, Tim, and I totally agree, right? It's like, sure, we might be in a B2B business, for instance. I work with a lot of B2B businesses, but in that space, you're still making a decision based off the human being you're going to do business with, right? And I think this goes back to trust as well. It's so critical that we actually trust the people that we work with. And I'll just give one tactical note here is that sometimes I think businesses like to emphasize their expertise, and they like to publish things on social media and say, this is what we think. But I think even just one little pivot is to say, actually, what if you had the founder or leaders or executive team sharing some of that same content from their own voice, and then having the company page republish that? I think that's one switch that you'll actually see you get a ton more engagement. And one other quick note, again, like I said, I think being different is the toughest thing to do, because it's easy to think, okay, well, if I want to expand and get known in the market, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to piss anybody off or whatever. But, that's fine. It depends on your industry. But I think you have to really be thinking, what are the things that are thought-provoking, the uncomfortable truths, the opinions you have that others won't agree with? And sure, it might push people away, but the reality is the worst thing to be is not memorable. The worst thing to be is forgotten. And so if you actually do have strong opinions on things and you can share them, you're probably better off because you'll attract that type of clientele or those type of people that are to engage with you, even if you're detracting and pushing away others.
Scott, I have a question for you about if there's a business owner out there who's thinking about getting started with this and thinking, okay, yeah, I need to go step up and do more videos or speak at events or go to networking events, things like that. I'm wondering if you have some examples of what that path looks like, how someone gets started. Obviously, you don't jump all the way to the arena and speaking to 5,000 people. What do the smaller first few steps look like to get started?
That's a great one, and you're right. I think that's what's on most people's minds. I've even talked to some people that are very good at speaking, and they're hesitant in different mediums that they're less comfortable with, right? And so to each their own. I'll give two examples because these are a little bit different. So I'll start out easily with my own example, right? So I'm not a huge networking guy. I'm not super extroverted. Some people think I am, but I mean, in reality, it took me some time to build up confidence and stuff. But what I really like going to is some chamber events. I didn't go to 100 different chamber events. I went to one particular one, and that's where I kind of found my tribe a little bit, right? Started to join a subcommittee, and then got more involved in helping planning events for the subcommittee. And then they wanted me to be on stage at, or actually it was at first, I think, a university invited us in to talk about AI or something like that, right? And then, so I was in that, and that was a very small, almost classroom setting. And then we had a much larger event, and I was invited to be part of that. And so my point is, it's just, you don't know where it's going to take you, but you have to take those first steps. And before you know it, you end up in a place where, number one, you look back and you say, oh my gosh, I didn't used to be comfortable at all with this. Now I have zero fear at all getting in front of anybody, whereas it took me a little bit of time. I'll give you another example because a company I work with, and the founder is really excellent. I'll maybe mention his name, Liam Holmes from MIS Solutions. And I know something about Liam, which I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning, but I don't think he loves like chamber events and some of these like schmoozing type events. That's just not his scene. So I get that. But for him, guess what? He still was able to get on stage. He still was able to do it a different way. So he didn't really want to go to an event and then, schmooze with people and then kind of become closer with them and then eventually, get invited to something. And instead, so what we did with him and what we worked on was, how do we maybe create some of our own small events? How do we invite other people into those events that we can invite in for their subject matter expertise? So it was more pull them in. How can we have a small podcast that is just gonna, and I know that might seem like a heavy lift, but the point is, in this case, it became not a super heavy lift for us to pull and invite people onto a podcast. And that led into Liam getting invited into other things and into other podcasts. And so I guess my point to all this is that everyone has their own path. There's not one right way. The only thing that I'd highly encourage is taking the first step, because these are hard things that we don't want to do, but they absolutely pay off.
I think what you were saying about Liam's approach was really interesting as well, that I think the outcome of all of this, or at least for me, part of the goal is that you're setting yourself up to be the expert at these events. And Liam did that kind of in the reverse way by inviting these other experts in. He actually became the connector and the expert, where I assume after those meetings, lots of his clients or attendees are coming to Liam of like, can you introduce me to this person? Or I thought this was interesting. What do you think about doing this for my business?
Yeah, I love those points. You to your point about being a connector, I think that's a bit of the cheat code. I think it's one of these things where if you want to help other people, they want to help you. And it sounds cliche. I guess we all know this stuff, but realistically, like if you post about yourself, look what I'm doing, look at me, right? That's one thing. And if you say, hey, look, I really want to highlight this person over here, on social media, you're going to get a ton more engagement when you say, let me show this person over here. You're doing them a favor. They feel better because they didn't want to post about themselves, right? And so if you think of yourself as a connector, that to me is a cheat code as an owner. Because it's this almost inbound approach. I'm a huge believer in the inbound approach. And I love too, Tim, that you brought up after you get off stage, I'm the same way. Like I've gotten better at cold approaches and at events and things like that. So I've become more comfortable with that over time. But oh my gosh, I love it how much easier it is when after getting off stage, people approach you, as you said. It just makes it so much easier. Again, I'll share the event that I was at just last week. It's with really great people. It's a bunch of doctors, a bunch of dentists, a bunch of very smart people. And what was interesting was they were all super friendly to me when I first arrived as a keynote speaker, as a guest speaker, right? But when we talk, they were kind of like, oh, who is this guy? What is he doing, right? But as soon as I got off stage, my goodness, like the number of people that approached me afterwards, the number of people that connected with me afterwards, the number of people that like said, oh man, I really wanted to talk about this with you. And they all come to you, right? And all I had to be is literally this there, and there's always going to be someone approaching me, and then I can have a good conversation. And that's 100 times easier than those cold approaches that you mentioned and you didn't like, Tim. So that's the cheat code. If you can get on stage, it just changes the game. You're the same person, but my gosh, how much easier is it when they approach you?
And it's a huge confidence booster in your journey of public speaking when someone comes up afterwards. I remember the first time that happened, I was like, wow, you were actually listening to what I was saying. I just think I'm saying things that to me are often feel like common sense, but are then things that, haven't occurred to other people, or they just haven't happened in their businesses yet. And so it gave me a lot more confidence. I think there's a huge imposter syndrome that comes for a lot of people with public speaking of who am I to get up on stage and say these things when I feel like I'm just finding my way in the dark. I don't really know what I'm doing, but every business is at a different stage and everybody's at a different level of knowledge for any topic. So whatever you have to share, some people are going to be more advanced than you, but there's likely going to be more people who are not as advanced as you and have something to learn from that. And I think that kind of brings me to what I think is the other big hurdle for people getting started out with this stuff is how do I find a topic that others will find interesting and add some value to wherever they are in their business or whatever it is I'm talking about. Scott, what would be your advice in that situation? We talked a little bit about you got to have your opinion on certain things, but where's the starting point for that brainstorming of topics to cover in speaking events?
That's a great question. I think there's two elements that I want to touch on here. Number one is when you're thinking about the topics, right? Of course, you want it to have some overlap with what you do, right? And so if you are in a certain field and there's a niche subsection of that field, then maybe you can niche down and be kind of the specialist in that subsection, and that brings back into your broader offering or something, right? But you also need to make sure there's not a ton of friction, right? Don't do things that you're completely uncomfortable with. I think another problem, this is almost like a branding problem. We sometimes like to think, I want to be this. I want to be thought of as that. But I think if you ask your friends, family, people around you, what do they see you as? Then you'll get potentially a different answer. And so that's a good starting point because it's not about you, it's about the audience. It's about what value you can provide to the audience. Now, the other thing that I think is important to touch on here a little bit, though, is once you get those training wheels and you start doing it as you've talked about, Tim, and kind of taking those steps one at a time, be careful who you compare yourself to. I'll share something that has happened to me a little bit. So I have a podcast, and to me, it is a little bit of a hobby podcast, right? It's not something that brings me direct business. But the point is, in my podcast, I've sometimes had people say, you should do this, and you should do that, you should do this. And I think what they're doing is they're trying to compare me to a Stephen Bartlett or, a Diary of a CEO or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I'm not him. Yeah, I don't have his lighting, but I'm not trying to be him. Right? And so I think you sometimes, will get some bad advice from the people around you, or yourself trying to compare yourself to some of those people. Your goal is not to become the next podcaster or the next video guy or whatever it may be. It's to be known in the smaller group, in the smaller pond. So I think you have to not compare yourself to the big players, compare yourself to your competitor maybe, right? And say, am I doing a better job on my LinkedIn, on my video, on my podcasting, on getting on stage than my competitor? Then you're winning because you're doing something that they're not willing to do and not willing to start with. One quick thing I'll say in this too. Sometimes if we think of YouTube, I know we can go in a bunch of different directions, but let's just say you post a YouTube video. Let's say you start posting YouTube videos or LinkedIn videos. If you do those things and you get a couple comments, right? You get a couple views, it can be demoralizing. But I think you might be surprised about the intangibles or the metrics you don't see. So an example is when I got very few views on some videos or some podcasts, what was amazing was, remember Tim, you were talking about getting on stage and how people approach you. Well, I was amazed by the fact that people that wouldn't comment, wouldn't say anything, I get very little engagement on something. Then when I saw them at an event, they say, oh, Scott, I saw you talk about this. I really want to talk about that. So don't get caught in the vanity metrics. Don't get caught in the comparing yourself to some superstar. That's not the goal here. The goal is to get your voice out there in a way that it's not today.
Scott, I want to transition a little bit. So far, we've been talking a lot about speaking at in-person events and networking and things like that. But I think a lot of this can translate into the digital world as well through videos and podcasting. What's your approach to that, and what's your advice for business owners who are thinking about taking that step?
So this is back to, it really depends on the individual and what is low friction for you. Don't try to do something that's going to be very high friction. So if you really don't like getting on stage, or you don't like networking, or you don't like whatever, or you don't like getting your face on, on videos, right? Then don't start with that, right? Because that's going to be a high friction thing you're going to avoid. I'll give another recent example. This was from a while back, but there was a company that I helped get on YouTube, and now they're doing very, very well on YouTube. And it was interesting because the gentleman is very good at speaking and communicating with people, but he's not a tech guy, and he wasn't really sure how he was going to get into this. And he said to me multiple times, Scott, I don't want to be a YouTuber, right? And totally fair, right? What we ended up doing in this case was we put a camera on the corner of his desk. In this case, we didn't have a studio. We didn't convert one of the conference rooms into studios, which, by the way, a lot of companies are doing now because they understand the importance of thought leadership and video and stuff. But my point is, we wanted to start small, low friction. So what did we do? Again, we put a screen, a teleprompter, a camera behind it. That might sound like a lot, but the point was we set it up so that it never left the side of his desk. and the team could come in, turn on the camera, click the record button, and the teleprompter would go up and whatever, and then he could talk. And that was it. And as soon as we started doing that, I was like, oh, we can do that every week, right? That's no problem. And then he started saying, Scott, maybe I could do this twice a week, right? And so we started getting to the point where it was like, guess what? He got better. He saw the benefits of it. Then he started doing more of it, right? Then he started saying, well, can I level this up? But the point was, it wouldn't have worked if I said, hey, let's become a YouTuber and let's invite 10 people over and let's do a webinar and let's do this and that. No, it only worked because we were able to work our muscles over time. We were able to get some of those small wins in and then graduate from there. And because it was a low friction starting point, we started to see the benefits and we started to level up after that.
Totally agree on all of that. Is like, how do you make this as seamless as possible? I think creating videos and podcasts is today what writing blog articles used to be, before all of this got so seamlessly automated with content creation. Because we've always, back in the day, had a challenge, like, how do we get the right people who are going to take the time to write this knowledgeable blog article? But it's so important to get in that habit and work the muscles of doing it over and over again and building a system that makes it easier for you. And we've been doing much better at that sort of stuff at Pronto for ourselves with video. But for a much smaller agency, I think, or a business leader, need to think, like, what is the thing that's stopping you? Is it that you hate watching videos of yourself and listening to your voice? Find an outsource editor, or if you're struggling to write the script, hire a writer to give you the first draft of the script and then you take it from there. I think that's a really valuable way to start out and make sure that you build the right muscles to make it a recurring, repetitive process that you don't miss out on. It just happens every week automatically because the process is running.
Exactly. And I love your point of just find the friction points, find the areas that you need to outsource, or, if you're not going to do the editing yourself, you can do it pretty easily. Like junior team member can actually use tools like Descript and others that will help them edit it and get something out the door. Because the biggest thing is to ship something. You got it. Just similar to SaaS companies know it's so important to get to ship, right? And I think it's you really have to do that, because until you get those videos out, until you see yourself on video, whatever it is, and then stop cringing, right? It takes a little. You're not gonna, if you never click the publish button, you're never gonna get that first cringe moment and then the second cringe moment, and then you're gonna get it better because you're gonna say, I don't want to have another one of those cringe moments. And so basically you're gonna get better, but you have to be able to get it out the door. So I totally agree, and it pays off. And I think that's the biggest thing that you have to realize is that as soon as someone comes in to your business and says, I saw you on video, I saw your LinkedIn post, I saw whatever that thing is, I saw you on stage. If you get that, you're going to start to realize, okay, this is actually paying off. It doesn't have to be a direct, client day one, right? But it has to be something where you're going to say, ooh, okay. And that's going to give you what you need to kind of get to the next leg.
Yeah, and again, like we talked about, the goal isn't to go viral from day one. So just to kind of throw you that last curveball, Scott, how do you kind of handle that ROI? Because, like we said, it's a journey. You've got to go it step by step. What's your approach for that?
Right? Look back. I do like numbers. I have a finance background and stuff like that. So I like numbers, but I also don't like to force numbers where there aren't numbers, right? I think looking at a single event and thinking of an ROI, or looking at a single video and thinking of an ROI is the wrong way to look at it. You start out small and you start doing the little things that have low friction, and you do them for a year. Right? You do them for a long time. You do them to the point that they actually have time to build, but do not be saying, what's the ROI on this YouTube channel that I launched last year? It's just not going to have it. You're not going to be able to see that line. And guess what? Your competitors or the individuals that did get the ROI, they also didn't get it that quickly, right? And so it's the long game that we're playing here, and we have to be honest about that. Sorry, the last analogy I'm going to give to this is fitness. Okay, now I got into the routine. Every morning I go for a walk, or every morning I do this thing. Every thing I go to the gym. It's back to habit. And then you fast forward a year or two, then you start looking down and saying, oh my goodness, things have changed. And I think that is what it actually is on this personal branding video stuff. It takes that much time, and you won't notice it every step, but you'll look back at yourself a year prior and you're gonna say, oh my gosh, that was a game changer for me. Well, I really appreciate you having me on. I know we spoke a lot about personal branding. Again, what I tend to do, here's the main concept, right? I've worked with a lot of business owners over the years. My biggest thing that I like to do is just solve the hard problems, right? It's the problems that you're avoiding. And of course, today we're talking about personal branding because I think that's a hard problem that a lot of business owners find themselves in. But sometimes it's the how do I expand into a new region. Sometimes it's how do I start, building my first, a certain team on my, how do I handle this challenge with my business partner, right? Oftentimes it's just the hardest problems that are most avoided. Those are what I like to do. I like to solve those hard problems. That's what I love to do with business owners, but at the same time, I love to also work with partners with great marketing companies because there's so many things that I can't do. I'm not a specialist in Google Ads and all these other things. There are a ton of things, or website design, right? All these things that I think business owners need, and that's why I love working with companies like Pronto. So I really appreciate the partnership we have together.